Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori. Today I am going to be giving you guys my September reading wrap-up. I read a lot in September. I had some great reads this month, and I know I'm a few days late in getting this out, but it's fine. It's fine. Nobody cares. I finished a pretty major series in the month of September. In August, I started by reading Malice by John Gwynne. And in September, I blew through Valor, Ruin, and Wrath, books 2, 3, and 4 of the Faithful and the Fallen series. I had quite the experience going through this series. I loved the tension in this series. I was very invested in several of the characters of the series to the point that they really were pulling me through these books very quickly, because with all of the points of view that exist in this series, it was really hard not to just keep reading because I wanted to get to my favorite characters' POVs and find out what was happening. I'm still kind of in shock that I read them as quickly as I did, but I do think it's kind of a testament to John Gwynne's incredibly accessible writing style that I was able to read these 3 very chonker books within a couple weeks of September. Overall, I had a really good time with the series. I think I gave the entire series like a 3.5 out of 5 star reading experience. I really loved a lot of the characters. I loved a lot of the world building. I did get tripped up a little bit on some of the plot stuff that I talk way more about in my video dedicated to my full review of the entire series. There is a good overview that is completely spoiler free, and I also included a section of spoilery thoughts for those of you that have already read the series. I will stand by the fact that John Gwynne is somebody who, if you are an animal companions person at all, like, these books are phenomenal. There are some quite fabulous animal companion characters in this series, and I know a lot of people really love animal companions in fantasy. I think he is a very easy to read author, so if you're looking for something that is a deep world that you can really get immersed in, but it isn't going to be as dense and hard to get through, this is definitely a series that I would highly recommend. Besides Faithful and the Fallen, I read 5 other books. You can see 4 here. That's because one of them I did unhaul after reading it, but I will go through these in the order that I read them. The one that I read in between Valor and Ruin was a book that was translated from the original Korean language, and that is Almond by Won Pyung-son. This book was about a young man who has a disorder where he doesn't feel the same emotions that most people do, and he really struggles to make friends and understand the world around him because of it. It was a great story that had a lot of really strong coming-of-age vibes of trying to make friends and how 2 kids with very different struggles can often find solace in each other, which was something that I enjoyed. It also shows the good and the bad influence that friendships can have while you are in that formative time of your life. I gave Almond, I want to say, a 3 or a 3.5 star rating. I have a full review on my Goodreads of this book, which I will link down in the description below. I really enjoyed it overall. There were some decisions, I think, later on in the book that I wasn't quite as sure about, but overall I definitely would recommend this book for anyone who is looking for a kind of coming-of-age boyhood friendship adventure that has some mental health themes and is shown from a different culture's perspective. In between reading Ruin and Wrath from the Faithful and the Fallen, I picked up The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. I've had this book sitting on my shelf for quite a while now. The Outsiders was one of my absolute favorite movies growing up, and I've always wanted to read the book but never had. And let me tell you what, this book did not disappoint. I loved this book so much. I love the story. The character of Johnny has been one who has been in my favored canon of characters pretty much since I watched the movie when I was a kid, and he has firmly stayed there ever since. And reading the book was just such an incredibly beautiful, nostalgic experience, but it's also just such a good story. I love that S.E. Hinton was able to showcase the kind of us versus them trope in such a raw and powerful way. To me, this is an incredibly profound book. The characters are very vibrant, and the fact that she does so much to get into our emotions in such a short space of time. This one I did give a 5-star rating. It's one of those stories that I think has been incredibly influential to me as a reader and writer, and so it was one of those what else was I gonna do with it? After I finished Wrath, I was ready for a different fantasy world that was maybe a little bit lighter and wasn't gonna be a giant chonker, and so I picked up Voice of War by Zach Argyle. Now, I do have my full review of this book up on my channel. I will link it in the card right there so you can go check it out. If you haven't read this book yet, I do have a spoiler-free overview of my thoughts. This is a self-published fantasy book, and it really showcases why self-pub fantasy is a force to be reckoned with. I really loved this book. I thought that it was a very strong first book opener into the trilogy. It made me very excited to continue on and read books 2 and 3, which I have heard from other readers are just even better than book 1, so I'm very much looking forward to finishing up this trilogy in the month of October. This book has a great magic system, it has an animal companion, it has some very strong family themes, which I really appreciated. The environments that are in this book are very distinct and very beautifully realized, and I just had a lot of fun going through this book. Next up, I went back to a self-pub fantasy favorite of mine, and that is Rob J. Hayes. This is the second book of his that I have read. I read Never Die about a month or a month and a half ago, and I followed it up with Pawn's Gambit in the month of September. This book really showcased a different side of Rob J. Hayes' brilliance when it comes to designing and building a motley crew of characters. These books are set in a heavily Japanese-inspired fantasy world. I feel like this book was such a good build-up of what we started with in Never Die. It had just enough familiar faces and names and locations for me to fall right back into the world. It introduces a mostly new cast of characters that were all very, very fun to get to know over the course of this book. These are so good. I have definitely gotten to a point where I am ready to read a large stack of Rob J. Hayes books in the next year and see what else he has done in this world and the other ones that he has created. I do have a GOODREADS review for this book, which I will link down in the description below. This one was a solid 4-star read for me. The last book of the month that I finished was The Red Palace by June Her. I wanted something that was a tiny step away from fantasy while still giving me kind of that rush and that strong character and that kind of tension that I've been looking for from the other books I read this month. This book is about a young woman who becomes a nurse in the palace in a historical Korea, and it is a murder mystery romance, kind of. The romance is there, but it is not overstated, which is something that I really appreciated. The murder mystery was just enough intrigue and just enough tension to keep me pulled through the story. What I really loved about this book is that the author was pulling from a story that happened in actual Korean history and kind of doing her own twist and take on it, and I just thought that was really cool, and I really appreciated how she handles the topic of characters with mental health and her philosophy behind that, which she explains in the back of the book in the author's note. It was exactly the right level of tension, but it was a little bit lighter than the other things that I was reading this month, and so it was a great read for the time that I picked it up. I gave it a solid 3.75 to 4 stars. I would just like to point out that this cover is really beautiful. I loved the cover. That was initially why I picked it up, and because it was written with a Korean-inspired story, and I've been wanting to read more Asian authors this year, and so yeah, it was a great time. I really enjoyed it. That is officially all of the books that I read in the month of September. I did a bunch of videos and reviews, most of which I've already told you about. I was also able to have a lovely Bookish Friends chat with Johan from Library of a Viking. We had a great time. We chatted about my experience with Malazan Book of the Fallen so far versus his experience with Malazan Book of the Fallen so far, which was different. We talked about the Cosmere, Brandon Sanderson, and how both of us kind of had a gateway into fantasy with Mistborn and why we thought Mistborn was so many people's gateway into fantasy and why it worked so well as that. I will also link that down below in the description box, because if you haven't seen it, we had a really great chat and we would love to have you comment below the video and join in on the discussion. So I think that's about it. I'm very excited for the month of October. I've got some incredible books on my TBR. I have some fun videos planned. I also have a couple of bookish chats lined up for the month of October, which I'm very excited about. I've met a couple of authors over on Twitter that I'm going to be featuring on my channel in the month of October. I am also going to be on a bookish discussion over on the channel Matt on Books. I will link his channel down in the description box below. Be sure to go check that out because we will be live. I am so excited about that. It's going to be a great time. That's kind of what's coming up for the channel and what's been going on in this past month. Thank you guys so much for getting me to 1,000 subscribers this month. That's nuts. That's a huge milestone, and I am just honestly so grateful that you guys hang out on my channel and enjoy my videos. So thank you so much for that. I hope you guys are all having a fabulous week. I hope you are all having 5-star reading experiences, and I will see you in the next video.